the moment my son asked for the deed to my house, claiming he just wanted to keep it safe for me. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty windows. I spent 30 years scrubbing floors to pay for these walls. I knew that smile was a mask. So I packed a fake bag, hid cameras in the smoke detectors, and drove away. What I saw on my phone screen turned my love into ice. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 63 years old, a widow of exactly 1 year, and I live in a silence that is usually heavy enough to crush a weaker woman. I bought this 2-story house in Maple Glen, Oregon, with the money I earned ruining my knees and drying out my hands as a night shift manager at Coraline Maintenance. For 3 decades, I scrubbed other people's floors so that I could own my own. But tonight, as I sat at my dining table, the silence was replaced by a noise far more unsettling, the rhythmic tapping of my son's fingers on a manila folder he had slid next to my plate. Mark is my only child. He is in his 30s now, handsome in the way his father was, but recently his eyes have changed. They used to be warm, now they are calculating. He has been coming around more often lately, always with Sabrina Cole attached to his arm like a decorative but poisonous vine. Sabrina is beautiful, with perfectly highlighted hair and a voice that sounds like syrup poured over crushed glass. She claims to be a care specialist for the elderly, working for an organization with a name so generic I can never quite remember it. "Mum, listen to us," Mark said, leaning forward. The roast chicken I had prepared sat untouched on his plate. "The world is getting dangerous. Hackers, scammers, they target women your age. Sabrina and I think it would be best if you let us hold on to the deed to the house and your bank passwords, just for safekeeping." I looked at him. Then I looked at the folder. "Safekeeping," I repeated, testing the word. It tasted metallic. "It is just a precaution. Eleanor," Sabrina chimed in, smiling. Her teeth were very white. "We just want you to be able to relax. You have worked so hard. Let Mark handle the heavy lifting now." As she spoke, my eyes drifted to Mark's hands. He was standing up to get a glass of water, or so I thought. As he passed the key rack by the hallway mirror, his hand moved with the fluid, unconscious practice of a thief. He snatched the spare set of house keys, the ones with the little red tag, and dropped them into his pocket. A sensation like ice water poured down my spine. "Mark," I said, my voice steady despite the cold inside me. "Why did you put my keys in your pocket?" He froze. He patted his pocket and forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Did I, God? Habit. I worry about you locking yourself out. I'll hold on to them for you." He did not put them back. Sabrina reached across the table and patted my hand. Her skin was cool and dry. "See, this is what we mean. Eleanor, Mark is worried. You have been so forgetful lately. Remember last week when you left the gas stove on and the front door wide open all night?" Mark looked at me then, shaking his head with a mixture of theatrical concern and genuine annoyance. "She is right. Mum, you could have burned the place down. It is scary." I pulled my hand away from Sabrina. I sat up straighter, feeling the steel in my back that 30 years of night shifts had forged. "I have not used the gas stove since last Tuesday," I said, looking directly at Sabrina. "And the front door has a deadlock that I engage every night at 9 o'clock sharp. I checked it twice last week because I heard a dog barking. I am not senile. Sabrina, do not rewrite my history while I am sitting right here." Sabrina blinked, her smile faltering for a split second. A flash of genuine irritation crossed her face before she smoothed it back into professional concern. Mark sighed loudly, slapping his hand on the table. See, this is the stubbornness I am talking about. Mum, look at this place. It is too big for you. The stairs, the maintenance. It is a death trap. He paused, and then he said the words that I think he had been practicing in the mirror. Maybe we should sell. There is a luxury assisted living facility near Sabrina's apartment. We can handle the sale, manage the money for you. You would be safe. The air left the room. It was not about safety. It was about the equity sitting in these walls. My son, the boy I had raised to be kind, was looking at me and seeing a walking ATM. I am not going anywhere. Mark, I said quietly. The rest of the visit was suffocating when they finally stood to leave. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Mark scooped up a stack of my unopened mail from the counter. I will just look through these for bills you might have missed, he muttered, not waiting for permission. Sabrina hugged me at the door. It was a stiff, performative embrace. She leaned close to my ear, her perfume cloying and sweet. We only want what is best for you, Eleanor. Do not make this hard. I watched them walk to their car. Mark walked with a bounce in his step, the weight of my spare keys in his pocket and my mail in his hand. When I closed the door and turned the lock, I leaned my forehead against the wood. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. For 63 years, I had feared intruders, muggers, and strangers in the dark. But as I stood there in the hallway of the home I had built with my own sweat, I realized a terrifying truth. The most dangerous person in my life was not a stranger. It was the boy I had taught to tie his shoes. And I knew, with a mother's terrible instinct, that they were just getting started. My hands have always been the map of my life, sitting under the harsh light of the kitchen fixture. I traced the calluses on my palms, hardened remnants of 28 years at Coraline maintenance. I could still smell the industrial ammonia and hear the drone of the heavy floor buffers I used to push across miles of office hallways while the rest of the world slept. Every ache in my knees, every stiff morning when my back refused to straighten, was the price I paid for this house in Maple Glen. I did not buy it with inheritance or luck. I bought it with sweat. It was supposed to be the one solid thing I could leave behind for Mark, a fortress to ensure he never had to struggle the way I did. I closed my eyes and saw him as a boy, back when we lived in that cramped apartment on 4th Street where the radiator clanked all night. I remembered working double shifts just to buy him his first pair of real brand-name sneakers because the other kids were teasing him. I remembered the way he looked up at me, his eyes wide and shining, and said, "Mom, you are my hero." That voice was the fuel that kept me going through thousands of nights of mopping floors. Then came the day my husband, Bill, a man who spent his life hauling timber on the interstate, pulled his truck onto the shoulder and died of a massive heart attack. At the funeral, Mark was a wreck. He was 30 years old, but he clung to me like a child. He held my hand so tight my knuckles turned white. "I will take care of you, Mom." He had sobbed into my shoulder, his tears wetting my black dress. "I promise. I will step up. I will not let you be alone." For a few months, I believed him. But grief is heavy, and promises are light. The visits became sparse. The phone calls became short. Every time I asked him to come over for Sunday dinner, there was an excuse. Work was too busy. The traffic was bad. And then The excuses shifted to a new center of gravity, Sabrina. I remembered the first time I met her at a noisy diner downtown. She did not shake my hand. She hugged me, pressing her expensive blouse against my old cardigan. "It is so good to finally meet you." Mama Ellie. She had squealed, using a nickname nobody had ever given me. I had smiled, but my stomach turned. It felt like a salesperson trying to close a deal, not a girlfriend meeting a mother. "It is nice to meet you, too, Sabrina," I had said, trying to be polite. Over the last few months, the conversation had shifted from family to finance. It started small. Mark would mention that the housing market in Oregon was at an all-time peak. He would say things like, "You are sitting on a gold mine, Mom." Then Sabrina would chime in with stories from her job. She told me about an uncle of hers who transferred all his assets to his children early. He just wanted to avoid the probate courts, she had said, stabbing a piece of lettuce with her fork. It was so smart. He saved thousands of dollars. Now he just relaxes. And his kids handle the headaches. I brushed it off then. But the memory that made my blood run cold happened just 3 days ago at the bank. I had gone in to deposit my pension check. The teller, a nice woman named Sarah who has known me for 10 years, lowered her voice. "Mrs. Hayes," she whispered, sliding my receipt under the glass. "Did you ever decide on that power of attorney paperwork your son came in to ask about? He seemed very anxious to get the forms for full control over the accounts." I had stared at her, my mouth dry. I have not decided yet. Sarah. I had never asked for those forms. I never even knew they existed. Sitting alone in my kitchen now. The pieces clicked together with a terrifying precision. Sabrina worked in senior care. She knew the system. Mark was suddenly obsessed with my memory, telling me I was forgetting things I knew I had done. And the bank. They were not just worried about me. They were building a case. They were creating a paper trail of a senile old woman who needed a guardian. I looked down at the floor. There was a hairline crack in one of the ceramic tiles near the refrigerator. I remembered the day I laid these tiles myself, mixing the grout, my knees aching, determined to make the kitchen beautiful. I had fixed that crack once, but it had come back. Some things, once broken, cannot support weight anymore. They think I am weak. I whispered to the empty room. I realized then that the son who once called me his hero was gone. In his place was a stranger who looked at his mother and saw a paycheck. And as I sat there, the grief in my chest began to harden into something cold and sharp. Something that felt a lot like the steel handle of a mop, hard, unyielding, and ready to work. The first crack in their facade appeared at the pharmacy counter on a Tuesday afternoon. I had gone to pick up my blood pressure medication, just as I did every month. Mr. Henderson, the pharmacist who has known me since Mark was in braces, frowned at his computer screen. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "This is odd. The system says the boyfriend of that nice lady, Sabrina, came by just last week to pick up a refill for you. He said you had misplaced the bottle and were worried about your levels spiking." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had the bottle sitting on my nightstand at home. It was half full. He must have been mistaken. "Mr. Henderson," I managed to say, forcing a smile that felt like cracked plaster. "But I will take this refill anyway, just to be safe." When I got home, I dumped the contents of my old bottle onto the kitchen table. I counted them. Then I looked closer. Mixed in with my usual white tablets were two that looked almost identical, but slightly thicker. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I realized why I had been waking up at noon, groggy and disoriented, feeling like my head was stuffed with cotton. They were not just waiting for me to become confused. They were helping the process along. My God. Mark, I whispered, my hand shaking as I swept the pills back into the container. You are poisoning your own mother. The next blow came from the bank. The branch manager called me the following morning. Mrs. Hayes. I am just calling to verify the inquiry made on your account regarding the transfer of retirement assets, the voice on the phone said. The gentleman asked specifically about the protocol for immediate transfer in the event that the account holder is declared mentally incapacitated. I gripped the receiver so hard my knuckles turned white. Block it, I said, my voice trembling with rage. I want you to freeze any changes, and I want a printout of exactly who asked what and at what time. Do you understand me? I needed to see the evidence with my own eyes. I called Marisol Vega, my neighbor. Marisol is sharp. She used to work in IT before she retired. I asked her to look at my old laptop, claiming I was having trouble with my email. She sat at my kitchen table, clicking away, until she stopped. Eleanor, she said, her voice low and serious. Look at this. She turned the screen toward me. It was an email from Sabrina's personal address sent to Mark. Attached was a PDF document titled Durable Power of Attorney. It was blank, just waiting for my signature. But it was the text in the body of the email that made my stomach turn. Get her to sign this week. Babe, if we wait too long, the doctor might not sign off on her competency later. Later that evening, the reality of their plan slapped me in the face. I heard voices in the driveway. Mark and Sabrina were standing by his car. I cracked the kitchen window just an inch. You are being a coward. Mark Sabrina's voice hissed through the screen. We are running out of time. If she actually falls and breaks a hip before we get the signature, the state steps in. They will appoint a guardian. We lose control of the assets. This is a golden opportunity. And you are wasting it because you are too scared to push a pen into her hand. Keep your voice down. Sabrina? I am trying, Mark pleaded, sounding pathetic and weak. It is not that easy. She is stubborn. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. I went to the living room and sat in the dark. I pulled out my phone and searched for the term elder financial abuse. The screen glowed with lists of warning signs, isolation from friends, missing items, confusion induced by medication, gaslighting. Suddenly, the last 6 months made sense. The times I woke up to find the front door unlocked when I knew I had bolted it. The dining chair moved 3 inches to the left, just enough for me to bump into it in the dark. The missing utility bills. I had thought I was losing my mind. I had thought I was becoming the burden Mark said I was. No, I said to the silence. I am not crazy. I looked around the living room. I remembered scrubbing the baseboards until my fingers bled to pay the mortgage. I remembered the nights I sat in this very chair, worrying about how to pay for Mark's college tuition. They think I am weak, I whispered, and the fear in my chest began to burn away, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They think I am just a senile old woman they can push into a grave to get a payout. Well, let us see who is weak. If I confronted them now, they would deny it. They would hide the pills, delete the emails, and tell everyone I was paranoid. I needed more than suspicion. I needed them to show their true faces. I needed to vanish, to leave the stage empty so the actors would forget their lines and reveal the plot. I stood up and walked to the calendar on the wall. I stared at the dates for next week. "I think it is time for a vacation," I said, my voice steady for the first time in months. I would give them exactly what they wanted, an empty house. And while they thought they were playing king and queen of my castle, I would be watching every single move they made. I called them on a Thursday evening, keeping my voice low and trembling over the phone. I told them I needed to speak with them about something serious. When they arrived, I was sitting in the armchair, wringing a tissue in my hands, putting on the performance of a lifetime. "I do not know what is happening to me," I said, looking down at the carpet. "I feel loose, like I am losing time. I think I need to get away. Just for a little while. Maybe 3 or 4 weeks. Just to clear my head." Mark looked at Sabrina, and I saw a flash of hunger in his eyes that he quickly covered with a mask of concern. "That sounds like a great idea." "Mom," he said, leaning forward. "Where were you thinking Florida?" I lied. "I could go see that old friend, Betty, you know, the one I told you about years ago." Mark had never met Betty because she did not exist, but he nodded eagerly. "Florida is perfect. The sun will do you good." Sabrina reached out and squeezed my knee. "And do not worry about the house. Eleanor, Mark and I can stay here. We will water the plants, take in the mail. It is the perfect time for us to look after things for you. You should go. Go tomorrow." They practically pushed me out the door. But they did not know that the house they were so eager to occupy was already rigged. 2 days before, I had asked Marisol to send over a young man named Benji. He was a quiet, lanky guy who worked in security, but I told Mark he was there to fix the Wi-Fi. Benji worked with the precision of a surgeon. "This one goes in the smoke detector in the hallway," Benji had whispered, standing on a stepladder. "It has a wide-angle lens. It sees everything from the front door to the kitchen archway." We moved through the house like conspirators. He placed a tiny camera inside the frame of the landscape painting in the living room, drilling a hole so small it looked like a speck of dust in the canvas. He hid another in the dense leaves of the artificial fern in the corner, and a fourth one inside a fake electrical outlet plate in the bedroom. Finally, he taped a high-sensitivity audio recorder to the underside of the heavy oak dining table. "Everything goes to the cloud," Benji explained, handing me a slip of paper with a password. "Only you and Marisol have access, even if they find the cameras and smash them. The footage is already gone." I paid him $400 in cash and felt it was the best money I had ever spent. On the morning of my departure, I packed a suitcase with old clothes I did not care about. I had bought a plane ticket to Miami, a fully refundable one that cost me nearly $600, just to have a boarding pass to show them. Marisol drove me to the airport. Mark and Sabrina met us at the curb to wave goodbye. I hugged my son. He felt stiff, his muscles tense, like he was holding back the urge to shove me through the automatic doors. "Be safe." "Mom," he said, "call us when you get there." "I will," I said. "Thank you for taking care of everything." I walked through the security checkpoint, turning back once to wave. I saw Sabrina check her watch. I waited until I was out of their sight. Then I ducked into the restroom, waited 20 minutes, and exited the terminal through the arrival doors. I went straight to the refund counter, cancelled the ticket, and walked out into the grey Oregon afternoon. I took a taxi to the town of Gresham, 15 miles away. I had the driver drop me off at the Starlight Motel, a place with peeling paint and a neon sign that buzzed like an angry hornet. I paid cash for the room and registered under my birth name, Mary Eleanor Carter. The room was small and smelled of bleach and stale carpet. The walls were paper-thin. I could hear the television blaring in the room next door. But the Wi-Fi signal was strong. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and opened the security app on my phone. My hands shook as I typed in the password. The screen flickered, black at first, and then the feed stabilized. My living room appeared in crisp color. It was empty. The house was silent. The clock on the wall read 6:30. I sat there for an hour, staring at the empty room, feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. Then, at 7:15, the phone buzzed in my hand. Motion detected. Front hallway. I watched on the small screen as the front door swung open. Mark walked in first, carrying 2 large suitcases. Sabrina followed him, lugging a box of what looked like kitchen supplies. They did not look like people house-sitting for a few weeks. They looked like people moving in. Finally, I heard Sabrina say, "The audio from the dining room was crystal clear. God, I thought she would never leave. It smells like old lady in here. Open a window." Mark laughed, a sound that twisted like a knife in my gut. "Relax, babe. She is gone. We have the place to ourselves. 3 weeks to find where she keeps the rest of the paperwork." I watched them drop their bags in the middle of my living room floor. I watched Sabrina kick off her shoes and walk into my kitchen as if she owned the title deed. I reached over and turned off the lamp on the bedside table. The motel room plunged into darkness, save for the pale blue light of the phone screen illuminating my face. I pulled my legs up onto the bed, wrapping my arms around my knees. I was not going to sleep tonight. I was going to watch. I was going to watch every step they took, every drawer they opened, and every word they spoke in the house they thought they had stolen. For the first few hours, I felt like a voyeur in my own life. The glow of the phone screen was the only light in the motel room, painting my face in spectral blues and whites. I watched as Mark and Sabrina moved through my house with the casual arrogance of conquerors. They opened my cedar chest. They rifled through the envelopes I kept in the kitchen drawer. I watched my son count the emergency cash I kept hidden inside an old coffee tin, $300 I had saved for a rainy day. He tossed the bills onto the counter like they were nothing. God, the smell. Sabrina laughed, her voice tinny through the speaker. "It smells like mothballs and decay. We are going to have to burn these drapes." She stripped the sheets off my bed, the floral ones I had bought on sale at Macy's 5 years ago, and replaced them with silk ones she had brought from her suitcase. It was a violation so intimate it made my skin crawl. Then the feed switched to the kitchen. Sabrina was standing by the counter, holding my daily pill organizer. She popped the lids open, one by one. "Mark, look at this," she said, waving a bottle of my blood pressure medication. "If we just double the dose for a week, she will be confused. She will be dizzy. The doctor will take one look at her pupil dilation and sign whatever we put in front of him." I gripped the motel bedsheet. They were not just waiting for me to fail. They were engineering it. Later, the camera in the living room caught them arguing. Mark was pacing, running a hand through his hair. "I do not know." "Sab," he muttered. "It is risky. That is my mum. If we push too hard? My heart leapt for a second. He still cares? I thought. He is hesitant. But Sabrina cut him off, her voice smooth and venomous. Mark, look at me. She does not understand what is good for her anymore. You are saving her from herself. Think about the equity in this place. If she has an accident and there is nobody here to make decisions, the state takes it all. Is that what you want, to lose everything because you were too scared to act? Mark stopped pacing. He looked at her. Then he looked at the floor. No. You are right. We have to do this. The hope in my chest died. The horror escalated as the night wore on. The audio recorder under the dining table picked up a sound that made my blood freeze. It was Sabrina's voice, but she was changing it, making it quiver, pitching it lower to sound frail. Help me. Please. I do not know where I am. I think I left the stove on. She paused, then burst out laughing. How was that? Did I sound like a dementia patient calling 911 perfect? Mark's voice replied. I felt sick. I wanted to turn it off, but I could not look away. The feed switched to my small home office. Sabrina was sitting at my computer, accessing my bank accounts. Mark was sitting at my desk with a pad of paper. He was holding one of my old checks. He would sign, frown, crumple the paper, and sign again. He was practicing my signature. But the final blow, the one that broke me, came from the camera hidden in the smoke detector at the top of the stairs. It was nearly midnight. Mark and Sabrina stood at the top of the landing, looking down the carpeted steps. Mark pointed to a spot near the bottom, where the banister curved. Here, Mark whispered. His voice was cold, pragmatic. If she falls here, it is a straight drop. She would definitely break something. Maybe a hip. Maybe an arm. A broken arm is enough, Sabrina replied, nodding. Enough to prove she is unsafe living alone. We get temporary guardianship for medical decisions immediately. Mark stared down the stairs. If she just slips. It happens all the time to people her age. I stopped breathing. The phone slipped from my sweaty palm and landed on the motel quilt. I sat there, frozen in place, my lungs refusing to draw air. I had spent the night telling myself that Sabrina was the witch, that she had brainwashed my poor, weak son. But I had just watched my son, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the man who promised to protect me at his father's funeral, calculate the best angle for his mother to break her bones. He was not a victim. He was a co-conspirator. Sabrina turned to him on the screen. We will call Dr. Lowell tomorrow. He is a friend. We will tell him we are worried about her memory. Make sure she takes those double doses when she gets back. We need her groggy, and keep her away from those nosy neighbors. I reached out with a trembling hand and picked up the phone. I did not turn it off. Instead, I rewound the footage. I found the timestamp where Mark pointed down the stairs. I played it again. If she falls here, I listened to it until the tears dried on my cheeks. I listened to it until the heartbreak hardened into a block of ice in my chest. I listened to it until Mark was no longer my son, but a stranger who had invaded my home. I turned off the bedside lamp, leaving only the pale blue light of the screen. I did not sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the empty hallway of my house, waiting for morning. I was done being the victim. If they wanted a war, they had just handed the general her map. The next morning, the sun rose over a world that looked the same, but felt entirely different. I did not cry. I showered, dressed in my simple clothes, and drove 20 miles to the next town. I parked in front of a small brick building with a modest sign, Jordan Blake, attorney at law. Jordan was a man in his 40s with kind eyes and a handshake that felt like solid rock. He listened to me without interrupting. When I placed my phone on his desk and played the video of Mark pointing down the stairs, the air in the room seemed to vanish. Jordan's face darkened. He leaned in, watching the footage a second time. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice low and serious. "This is not just inappropriate. This is conspiracy to commit bodily harm. And given your age and the financial motive, it qualifies as elder abuse. We can go to the police right now." "Not yet," I said. "I want to be sure. I want to know who she is." Jordan nodded. He turned to his computer. He had access to databases that I did not. It took him less than 20 minutes to find the truth. "Her name is not Sabrina Cole," Jordan said, turning the monitor so I could see. "It is Jessica Vance. She has done this before. 2 years ago, in Arizona, she moved in with an elderly gentleman named Arthur Miller. By the time his children found out, she had power of attorney and had drained his savings. She settled out of court to avoid jail time. I felt a wave of nausea. My son had not just met a bad woman. He had brought a professional predator into my home, and he was helping her hunt. "We need to lock everything down," Jordan said. "Immediately." For the next 3 hours, we worked. We created a revocable living trust for the house. We changed every password. We alerted the bank to flag any transaction over $50. Then, Jordan pulled out a camera. "I need you to record a statement," he said. "State your name, the date, and that you are of sound mind. We need proof that you are lucid, in case they try to use those doctors against you." I did it. My voice was clear. My eyes were dry. Then I called Marisol. She came to the lawyer's office, and when she saw the video, she covered her mouth in horror. Then her eyes narrowed. "I am with you." "Eleanor," she said fiercely, "whatever you need. We will catch them. We need to catch them in the act," Jordan said. "The video is strong, but if we want to make sure she goes to prison and Mark, well, if you want Mark to face reality, they need to believe they have won. We hatched a plan. It was dangerous. It required me to go back into that house, to sleep under the same roof as the people who wanted to hurt me. But I was not afraid anymore. I was a mother who had just realized her job was not to protect her son, but to stop him. My return to Maple Glen was the opening act of the most difficult performance of my life. Mark met me at the airport arrivals curb, just as we had planned. I stepped out of the terminal and immediately slumped my shoulders, letting my bag drag on the concrete. When he reached for me, I leaned my full weight against his arm, making sure my hand trembled against his sleeve. "Oh, Mark, the travel." I breathed, fluttering my eyes. It takes so much out of me these days. My head feels like it is spinning. "I have got you, Mom," he said. He sounded relieved, likely because a weak mother is easier to push than a strong one. When we walked into the house, the air felt different. They had moved my furniture. My comfortable, floral recliner was gone, replaced by a sleek, uncomfortable grey chair that looked like it belonged in a dentist's waiting room. My ceramic collection was missing from the mantel. In the past, I would have screamed. I would have demanded to know where my things were. Instead, I pressed a hand to my chest and smiled a vacuous, confused smile. "Oh," I said, looking around. It looks so tidy, very spacious. You two have done such a wonderful job." Mark and Sabrina exchanged a glance of triumph. They thought I was broken. They thought I was yielding. That evening, the gaslighting began in earnest. Sabrina took on the role of the doting nurse. She brought me a glass of water and my pill organizer to the dinner table. "Time for your medicine. Mama Ellie." She cooed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We organized it for you while you were gone. To help you remember." I looked at the cup. There were 2 extra blue pills in the mixed sedatives, strong ones. I put the pills in my mouth, took a sip of water, and swallowed loud enough for them to hear. But I only swallowed the water. I tucked the blue pills under my tongue, a trick I had learned from watching crime shows. Later, I spat them into a tissue and hid them in a hollowed-out book in my bedroom. I was not going to be the drugged zombie they needed me to be. The next morning, Mark announced that he had made an appointment for me. "It is just a checkup." "Mom," he said, avoiding my eyes, "with a Dr. Lowell. He is from the Cognitive Assessment Center. Just to make sure everything is okay upstairs." I knew that name. Jordan had shown me his file. Dr. Lowell had been sued twice for falsifying competency reports in estate battles before the doctor arrived. I checked the feed from the kitchen camera on my phone while locking myself in the bathroom. I watched Sabrina hand Dr. Lowell a thick white envelope. He slid it quickly into the pocket of his lab coat. "We need her to look not well," Sabrina whispered to him. "Not enough to be hospitalized, but not enough to live alone." "I understand the nuance," Lowell had replied with an oily smile when the evaluation started in my living room. I played my part. When he asked me who the president was, I frowned and named a man who had been out of office for 20 years. When he asked me the month, I said it was October, though it was clearly March. Sabrina beamed from the corner. But then, I pivoted. I needed a safety net. And Mrs. Hayes. "Do you know the current balance of your checking account?" Lowell asked, expecting a blank stare. $12,452.16, I said sharply, looking him dead in the eye. "And my mortgage was paid off in 1998. Lowell blinked, confused. He scribbled furiously. I was creating a contradictory record, confused on trivia, but sharp on assets. It would look suspicious to any judge. By the time he left, Lowell looked nervous. I knew why. Jordan had sent a courier to his office that morning with a formal notice that all medical findings regarding Eleanor Hayes were to be CC'd to her legal counsel immediately. He knew he was being watched by more than just my son. The tension in the house began to rot the air. Mark was losing patience. 2 days later, he slammed a stack of papers onto the coffee table while I was watching television. "Mom, just sign the damn papers," he shouted, his face flushing red. "Why do you have to be so difficult? It is a temporary power of attorney." "That is all, Mark." "Honey?" Sabrina soothed, placing a hand on his shoulder while looking at me with pity. "Do not yell at her. She's just confused. Eleanor, we are just trying to help you. Do you not trust us? I just want to read them." I stammered, my hands shaking this time with rage, not age. "You read them yesterday," Mark snapped. "You are losing it, Mom. You are going to hurt yourself." And then what I looked at, him really looked at him. The mask of the loving son was gone. All that was left was a desperate, greedy man who was tired of waiting for his inheritance. I realized then that I was running out of time. If I did not act soon, they would stop asking and start pushing. They would make sure I had that fall down the stairs. I think I just need one more family dinner, I said softly, staring at my hands. To celebrate my return. If we can have a nice dinner, maybe I will feel ready to sign. Mark exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. He thought he had won. Okay, Mum, he said, his voice dropping to a patronizing tone. A nice dinner. Tomorrow night. Tomorrow. I agreed. I walked to my room and closed the door. My heart was pounding like a war drum. I was not going to sign anything. I was setting the table for their execution. The air in the house that evening was thick and heavy, like the sky right before a tornado touches down. I had spent the afternoon preparing the stage for what I called a reconciliation dinner. I told Mark and Sabrina that I was ready to listen, that I wanted to hear their plan for my future fairly and openly. They took the bait instantly, hearing only surrender in my voice where there was actually a trap. Before they arrived, I made one very specific adjustment to my kitchen. I placed a large, clumsy security camera right on top of the refrigerator. It had a blinking red light that was impossible to miss. I just want to feel safe when I am alone. I rehearsed saying to the empty room, it was a decoy. I wanted them to see the camera they could avoid, so they would forget to look for the tiny lenses hidden in the smoke detectors and picture frames that were still recording every breath they took. At 6 o'clock, my guests arrived. My guests. I had invited Jordan Blake and Diane Morales, the caseworker from Adult Protective Services, to Mark and Sabrina. I introduced them simply as old friends from my days mopping floors at Coraline. Jordan wore a faded sweater that hid the sharp suit of a lawyer, and Diane looked like a kindly grandmother rather than a woman who put abusive caretakers in jail. Just sit, eat, and listen. I had whispered to them before the doorbell rang. Do not intervene unless I give the signal. Mark and Sabrina walked in at 6:30. Mark was carrying a thick plastic folder, and his face was bright with the anticipation of a payday. They froze when they saw the two strangers sitting at my dining table. Oh, Mark said, his smile faltering. We did not know you had company. Just some old friends catching up, I said, waving a trembling hand. I told them about your wonderful offer to help manage things. They thought it sounded so generous. Sabrina recovered first. Her professional mask slammed back into place, sealing off her annoyance. She walked over, shook hands with Jordan and Diane, and turned her high-wattage smile on me. The more the merrier, she chirped. We have nothing to hide. We are just family looking out for family. We sat down to pot roast, but nobody really tasted the food. The table was a battlefield. Sabrina wasted no time. She launched into her usual horror stories, anecdotes about elderly patients she had supposedly cared for. I had a client just last month. Mrs. Gable, Sabrina said, looking at me with wide, sad eyes. She was stubborn about signing the power of attorney. Then she fell in her bathroom. By the time we found her, well, the state took everything. Her son could not even access her checking account to pay for a private room. It was tragic. I saw Diane's hand tighten around her fork. Jordan kept his face neutral, but I saw him tap his phone on the table, ensuring the recording app was running. I picked up the pen Mark had placed next to my plate. I let my hand shake violently. If I sign this? I asked, my voice small and fearful. The house. It is still mine. Right, I mean. My name is still on the deed. Sabrina exchanged a quick look with Mark. She reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was cold. Well, Eleanor, on paper. Technically. Not exactly, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. To protect the asset from the state. We have to transfer the title to a trust managed by Mark, but it is just a formality. You still live here. Nothing changes for you, except that you are safe. Jordan and Diane exchanged a glance. That was the admission they needed. Coercion. Misrepresentation of legal documents. I put the pen down. I am just so scared of falling, I said, leading them to the edge of the cliff. That is exactly why we need to do this, Sabrina insisted, pressing harder. This house is full of hazards. The rugs, the bathtub, those stairs. If you took a tumble down those stairs in the middle of the night, Eleanor, it would be over. I looked up, locking eyes with her. Why the stairs? Sabrina, I asked. My voice was suddenly steady, stripped of the tremor I had feigned all night. Why are you so worried about me falling down the stairs specifically? The room went deadly silent. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked loudly. Sabrina blinked, her smile twitching at the corners. I just mean, stairs are dangerous. She stammered. Mark looked at her, then at me, a flicker of unease crossing his face. He remembered the conversation they had on the landing. He remembered pointing to the spot where I would break my neck. It was just an example. Mom, Mark said, his voice rising in defense. You are reading too much into it. Am I? I asked softly. I picked up the folder and held it to my chest. I think I need to sleep on this. Just one more night. Leave the papers here. Mark let out a frustrated breath, but he nodded. He thought he was inches away. He thought the deal was closed. Okay, Mom, he said, standing up. One more night? But tomorrow we sign. No more delays. No more delays. I echoed, as I watched them walk to their car, waving goodbye to my friends from Coraline. I felt a cold calm settle over me. They thought the curtain was coming down on my independence. They did not know that I had just finished the dress rehearsal, and tomorrow, the real show would begin. The morning sun hit the living room carpet, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but the atmosphere inside was cold enough to snap iron. I had called Mark and Sabrina at 9 o'clock sharp. I told them to come over. I told them I was ready to sign everything to get it over with. They arrived 20 minutes later, vibrating with the energy of people who think they have just won the lottery. Mark wore a crisp button-down shirt, and Sabrina had actually brought a bottle of champagne, though she had the decency to leave it in her oversized tote bag. This is the right decision. Mum, Mark said, setting his briefcase on the coffee table. He did not look at me. He looked at the pen in his hand. You will feel so much lighter once this is handled. I am sure I will, I said. My voice was flat. I sat in my armchair, the remote control resting on my knee. Before I sign, Mark, I want to check one thing. I have been having trouble with the new television. I want to make sure the security feed is working. You know how I get confused. Mark rolled his eyes, a gesture so dismissive it almost made me smile. Seriously, Mom. Now fine. Check the camera. The big one on the fridge. Right. Something like that, I said. I pressed the button. The screen did not show the grainy black and white feed of the kitchen. Instead, it showed a high-definition recording of my living room from 3 weeks ago. The timestamp in the corner was glowing white. On the screen, Mark and Sabrina were standing exactly where they were sitting now, But in the video, they were laughing. Sabrina was holding a stack of cash, my emergency money. $300. The mark on the TV said, "Not bad for a coffee can stash." In the room, the real Mark froze. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like he had been struck by lightning. Sabrina stopped midway through reaching for a document. I did not pause it. I let it play. The scene shifted. Now they were in the kitchen. "If we double the dose," Sabrina's voice boomed from the surround sound speakers, "she will be walking into walls by Tuesday. Dr. Lowell won't even have to lie." "What is this?" Sabrina hissed, standing up. Her eyes darted around the room. "Where? How did you—" I pressed the button again. The final clip played. The camera angle was from the top of the stairs. Mark and Sabrina were looking down into the foyer. "If she falls here," Mark's recorded voice whispered, cold and calculating. "It is a straight drop. A broken arm is enough for temporary guardianship." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a grave. Mark stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. That is out of context," Sabrina shrieked, her composure shattering. She pointed a manicured finger at me. "This is illegal. You cannot record us. This is an invasion of privacy." "Actually, it is perfectly legal to record within one's own home in the state of Oregon," a deep voice said from the kitchen archway. Jordan Blake stepped into the room, holding a file. Diane Morales followed him, placing her official badge on the coffee table with a heavy thud. "Who the hell are you?" Mark stammered, his voice cracking. "I am Mrs. Hayes's attorney," Jordan said calmly. "And this is Diane Morales from Adult Protective Services. We have witnessed everything, including your reaction just now." "You are crazy," Sabrina spat, grabbing her bag. "These videos are fake. She is senile." She doctored them. Jordan opened his file and laid a piece of paper on the table. "We have a certified digital chain of custody for every second of footage. And we also have this." He slid a photo across the table. It was a mugshot of Sabrina, but the name under it was different. Or should I call you Jessica Vance? The name you used in Arizona when you pulled this same scam on Arthur Miller 3 years ago. Sabrina went rigid. Diane stepped forward, holding up a tablet. "And just to be sure, I have someone on video call who would love to say hello." On the tablet screen, the tired face of a middle-aged man appeared. "That is her," the man said, his voice thick with anger. "That is the woman who convinced my dad to sign over his power of attorney. She used the exact same lines. He is confused. He needs help. She drained his savings in 4 months." Mark looked at the tablet, then at the video still frozen on the TV, and finally at Sabrina. He looked like a man waking up from a coma to find the building burning down around him. "Sabrina," he whispered, Is it true?" Sabrina turned on him. The mask fell away completely, revealing a face twisted with contempt. "Oh, grow up. Mark, do not look at me like that. You wanted the money just as much as I did. If you were not so weak and greedy, I would never have been able to get inside the door. You let me in." Her words hit him harder than a physical blow. He slumped back onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. I stood up. My knees did not hurt. My hands did not shake. I walked over to the coffee table and placed 2 stacks of papers in front of my son. "You have a choice." "Mark," I said. My voice was steel. I pointed to the first stack. "This is a criminal complaint against Sabrina Cole. alleging fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit bodily harm. It needs a witness signature. I pointed to the second stack. It was the guardianship application Sabrina had printed out weeks ago. I had found it in the trash. It had Mark's practice signatures all over the margins. Or, I said, you can explain to the police why your handwriting is on the paperwork planning my legal demise. Mark looked up at me. His eyes were wet, red-rimmed, and terrified. He looked at Sabrina, who was now backed into the corner like a trapped rat, and then he looked at the pen. Decide. Mark, I said, are you my son, or are you her accomplice? Mark took the pen. His hand trembled so violently that the tip tapped a frantic rhythm against the table. He did not look at Sabrina. He looked at the floor. His shoulders slumped, as if the invisible weight of his conscience had finally crushed him. He signed his name on the witness line of the criminal complaint. It was her idea, Mark whispered, his voice cracking. She said it was the only way to secure my future. But I let it happen. I listened. The sound of the pen scratching the paper was the sound of Sabrina's world collapsing. She let out a sharp, strangled noise and lunged for the front door. She threw it open, desperate to run, to escape the trap she had walked into. But her escape route was already blocked. 2 police cruisers were parked in my driveway, their red and blue lights flashing silently against the evening sky. Jordan had sent the evidence package the moment we sat down for dinner. Diane had given the signal. I watched from the hallway as an officer cuffed Sabrina's hands behind her back, right on the front porch step. The very same concrete step she had walked up a month ago to claim my life. She was screaming about lawyers and misunderstandings, but the heavy door of the squad car slammed shut, cutting off her lies. When the sirens faded into the distance, I walked back into the living room. Jordan and Diane nodded to me, gathered their files, and quietly let themselves out the back, giving us the room. Mark was sitting on the edge of the sofa, his head in his hands. He was sobbing, not the loud cries of a child, but the deep, heaving breaths of a man who knows he has lost everything. I am ready, he said, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. Call them back. Have them arrest me too. I deserve it. I do not care if you never want to see me again. I stood there, looking at my son. Part of me, the mother who had nursed him through fevers and cheered at his little league games, wanted to wrap my arms around him. But I did not move. That part of me had died the moment I heard him discuss breaking my bones. I walked to my desk in the corner and picked up a thick manila envelope. I returned and dropped it on the coffee table in front of him. It landed with a heavy slap. I am not sending you to prison, Mark, I said calmly. But you are not my heir anymore. He stared at the envelope. Inside is a copy of my new will and irrevocable trust. I continued. As of this morning, this house, my savings, and every penny of my pension are locked down. You have been removed as the beneficiary. If I die tomorrow, the proceeds go to a charity for victims of elder abuse. You get nothing. Mark flinched. That is the price, I said, my voice steady. That is the cost of standing on the stairs and calculating the angle of my fall. You wanted the money so badly you were willing to break me for it. Now, you will never touch a cent of it. Mark looked at the papers, then up at me. There was no anger in his face, only a profound shame. I do not want the money, he choked out. Is there any way I can still be your son? Just your son, not the beneficiary, just Mark. I looked at him for a long time. The silence stretched between us, filled with the ghosts of the memories we had ruined. "If there is a way," I said softly. "It starts outside that door. You need to leave. Mark. You need to pack your things, get a job that does not involve scheming, and stand on your own 2 feet for the first time in your life. Do not call me for money. Do not call me because you are in trouble. If you come back because you want to see your mother, not her bank account." He nodded slowly. He stood up, picked up his small backpack, and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob, looking back at me, waiting for a hug, a smile, something. I gave him nothing but a nod. I opened the door for him. I watched him walk down the walkway and onto the dark pavement of Maple Glen. He looked small under the streetlights, just like he had on his first day of school. But this time, I was not there to hold his hand. I was the one closing the door. When the lock clicked shut, the house was finally silent. I went back to the living room. The TV was still paused on the image of Mark and Sabrina plotting in my kitchen. I picked up the remote. I pulled the thumb drive from the side of the TV, my backup copy for the lawyers, and then I navigated to the system menu and hit delete all. The screen went black. The image of my son as a monster vanished, leaving only the reflection of a woman standing in her own living room. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. When the water boiled, I made a cup of chamomile tea. I sat at the table, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic mug. My hands were rough, the knuckles swollen from years of labor, but they were strong. They had built this life, and tonight, they had saved it. I took a sip of tea and looked out the window at the quiet suburban street. I was alone. But I was not lonely. I was safe. And I whispered to the empty room, making a promise to the woman reflected in the glass. I survived. If Mark ever comes back, he will find the door locked, and he will have to knock, not as an owner, but as a guest. And I will decide, in my own time, if I want to let him in. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was the hardest thing I have ever had to do, but I needed to share it. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please drop a comment below with your city or country. Let's see how far this story travels. If you want to hear more stories about resilience and family secrets, please subscribe to the Grandma's Family Diary channel, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who might need to hear this warning. Stay safe and protect what is yours.